The Chargers have officially re-signed speedster Jalen Guyton, and me and David are both big fans of the move, but we both agree it can't be the only move made at wide receiver.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers together now for 7 seasons, but this is our 5th season as a host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you guys, as always, for making us your first listen today, and to make sure you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on YouTube and listen wherever you get your podcast from. And today we're talking about the Chargers, a signing that they made for Jalen Guyton, and me and David both wanted this move. It's something we've talked about throughout the offseason, getting that speedster back, because they lost him in week 3 last year, and we all saw how much the offense missed his speed, even though he was kind of being phased out. And we like it, but it can't be the only move. It should not preclude the Chargers from going out and making an early draft pick at wide receiver. And we're also going to talk about how the Jalen Hurts contract will affect Justin Herbert's contract, because the big contract of that draft class, the first one, has now come out. So we'll talk about that and what the cap hits are for that, as well as Justin Herbert being up in the air as far as what he's going to do in OTAs because of a surgery he had on a torn labrum. And then we'll get into Eric Kendricks in the comments he had, why he came to the Chargers, and Brandon Staley getting his recruiting hat out again. But it starts with Jalen Guyton. David, like the move, right? Like, this is something we advocated for. This is a good move for the Chargers to bring him back. You get him on the cheap. You know you get a 4-3 guy. You know how much you need speed. But both of us know, even with Jalen Guyton, the problems were still there. So it just can't only be Jalen Guyton as far as the moves made at wide receiver.
No, absolutely not. But this is a move that always made sense, Daniel. It was something that I think the Chargers were always going to be keeping in contact with Jalen Guyton, probably monitoring his progress, waiting for an appropriate time for him to be healthy enough to go out there.
Because he had a torn ACL as well.
Yes, right. Yeah, exactly. He tore his ACL in week 3 against the Jacksonville Jaguars in a blowout game, which really truly sucks. But now we're about 6 months past that injury, and obviously things have to be trending upwards in that situation because the Chargers signed him back on Monday. And yes, it is a move I'm very happy about, very excited about. But yes, Daniel, it also cannot be the only move at wide receiver. There's still things that the Chargers need to get done to fill out that wide receiver room accordingly.
He does bring you raw speed, right? But the funny thing about Jalen Guyton is he kind of fits the model that Brandon Staley always kind of talks about not liking when he's asked about getting a speed receiver, which is basically you have to be able to be good in every aspect of being a receiver, not just a deep threat, when Jalen Guyton is pretty much just a deep threat. He's not a yak guy, right? Even with him, you still kind of have a missing spot as far as someone that can get you yards after the catch and create on their own. We've seen him run jet sweeps and things like that. That's not his forte. Still not a super explosive guy, doesn't really add more explosiveness to the roster. And I think the thing is like, hey, if you want to say Jalen Guyton is wide receiver 5, right? Chargers are going to add something else in the draft. They're still going to use a day 1 or 2 pick. I get that. But like, I don't think at all that just because you have Jalen Guyton means that you're not picking a wide receiver until the 5th round.
No, absolutely not. I mean, the Chargers still need to add explosiveness, playmaking ability, and a yak threat to that wide receiver room. I think you love bringing Jalen Guyton back into this room because of the speed that he brings to the table, but he's just one of the tools in that tool chest. Just like Keenan Allen's that route running savant, just like Mike Williams is that go up and get it big, jump ball type of wide receiver. I mean, these are all things that you need, but you still need someone that can create whenever you put the football in his hands. And I don't think that person is there. And also you need someone that's going to be able to double as your punt and kick returner, because that's the most likely position to be able to have to double and take care of those duties. So no, I mean, this is not a move that should prevent the Chargers from taking one receiver, maybe even 2 more receivers, because I still feel like this room is at its best this year, hopefully any years going forward, with at least 6 wide receivers. I'm not trying to see that same situation play out last year and have it play out again in the seasons to come, Daniel.
I think the fear is you bring back Jalen Guyton and there's a sense in the front office of like, okay, well, we're good. We've rounded out this room a little bit.
No.
Hopefully they keep more guys just on the roster at that position just because last year they went with 5 for most of the year. It came back to bite them and you sign, starting guys like Michael Bandy and Jason Moore for games last year. It has to be a deeper room this season.
Yes.
If you have to make concessions on special teams, I get it. But I just don't think bringing back Jalen Guyton and taking – a 7th round return specialist in the draft is going to cut it. It has to be more than that. You have to be able to add premier resources to it. And there's really no one on the Chargers roster in the wide receiver room that should stop you from doing it, right? I like Josh Palmer. That shouldn't stop you from going out and getting another more explosive receiver and trying to add to that room, trying to add to the offense, and trying to make your offense the best offense in the league because you have someone like Justin Herbert, and that's actually a viable option, right? So I think that's the main point here is just he's very good, and that shouldn't be overlooked as far as the move. As a total package wide receiver, 2020, 2021, 28 receptions in 2020, 31 in 2021, right? But last year, it took until the garbage time against the Jaguars before he was really a part of the offense. So I think the other thing we can hope here, too, is maybe we see him used a little bit better, maybe a little bit more frequently if that's the role that he's in, right? With Kellen Moore running the offense. The Chargers are still, one Jalen Guyton injury away from having very, very average to very below average speed in their wide receiver room. But that doesn't mean, it's not meant to bag on Jalen Guyton. Like, there's still a lot of reasons to be excited about that signing if he's a depth piece because, when he was the only guy there, it came back to bite them. Now, if you get another speed guy and you still have Jalen Guyton, I think there's a lot to feel good about.
Yeah, you should also remember that Jalen Guyton and Justin Herbert do have a good rapport, and I think that is very important to remember. The chemistry is definitely there, and Jalen Guyton has, had some pretty decent production. 5 touchdowns of 20-plus yards since 2020, and he barely played in 2022. So he is a guy that, you target him down the field, chances are you're going to see him streaking into the end zone because that's basically what he brings to the table. I also will say that I feel like Jalen Guyton has progressed and gotten better as a route runner and, was targeted in some situations, in those gotta-have-it situations where he has come through in some of those situations. So I feel like Jalen Guyton has gotten better. But no, this is definitely not a complete room. We still need to add to it. I still love bringing Jalen Guyton back. I feel like this is just a move that should have happened already.
Yeah, even if you're overloading that room, right? Yeah. He needs just competition for whoever you have kind of at the bottom of the roster there. Like, it just can't be only that. But, like, last year when he did get hurt, it was that game where he had a 54-yard catch, and you're like, why aren't we seeing more targets for Jalen Guyton, right? So
exactly.
He is a deep threat, tracks the ball pretty well. We're always going to have that game against the Giants right before halftime, that like 64-yard.
The social media throw of the year, yeah.
Social media throw of the year, for sure. He does bring that to the table. When it was him and T-Billy, both of those guys seemed to bring a different element to the offense when they had both of those guys that had that speed. So I just think that's even more, should be more of an emphasis. Like, hey, let's have multiple of those guys so that we have kind of waves of dew coming, and we're not one injury away to someone like Jalen Guyton from just being really, really subpar and that, not explosive, not fast.
Yeah.
It's a room that needs work, even though you have 2 guys you feel really good about at the top with Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. But Brandon Staley did also talk to the media for the first time in a while because the Chargers are starting their offseason activities, which is where we saw Jalen Guyton. It's like, hey, that guy, he's out there. He must be back on the Chargers. But we got to hear from him, and we got to hear from Eric Kendricks as well. And he was asked about a Justin Herbert contract update, and he said he has no update. But the good news is Jalen Hurts just signed a gigantic, biggest deal in NFL history. So that means we now have the framework for what Justin Herbert's deal could look like. And we're going to talk about that coming up after this. But I need to tell you guys that first, the official sponsor of the Locked On Chargers podcast for betting is FanDuel. Grand slams, no-hitters, and double plays are back, and there's no better place to get in on the MLB action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now, new customers can step up to the plate with a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up, place your first bet, and get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if you don't win. right now the best bet out there is betting against the Padres scoring any kind of run. So make sure you get those bets in now before Fernando Tatis Jr. comes back after he's been tearing up AAA. But a lot of fun bets to get into with FanDuel. I love being able to bet on baseball, which goes really, really fast now, right? So you don't have to wait as long to see if you're going to be cashing. But so much great stuff, and I always use FanDuel for that. So don't miss out on your chance for that no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Brandon Staley got to talk with the media because the Chargers are starting their offseason programs, and Justin Herbert was not able to participate in those offseason programs, and we'll get into what the latest is on his shoulder recovery after getting surgery on a torn labrum this offseason. But let's talk about contracts, David, because Brandon Staley was asked about that specifically because Jalen Hurts was just made the biggest contract, or given the biggest contract in NFL history. He's now the highest paid quarterback of all time, and currently, obviously, in the NFL.
For average annual value, obviously not the biggest overall, because that's Patrick Mahomes. But yes.
Sure, but that's what it always goes off. How much are you making per year? He is now that guy, right? He didn't get a 10-year contract, so he's not Patrick Mahomes. But he did get the second most guaranteed money ever. So we now know, David, I think Justin Herbert will get at least what Jalen Hurts got, and this is what it was. 5 years, $255 million, $51 million in average value, $23 million signing bonus, and $173 million guaranteed. That's a really, really big number, and Justin Herbert's probably going to have an even bigger number than that.
Yes, he is. And I honestly was a little bit sad that this Jalen Hurts contract got done before the Justin Herbert contract. And I'm hoping that the Justin Herbert contract gets done before the Joe Burrow contract, just because, hey, for every deal that gets done, the next deal is just going to get bigger. I mean, that's just the way it works in the NFL. Jalen Hurts gets a massive contract, and it's not really a matter of if. It's a matter of when. These guys are going to get these big deals. That's just the way it is. Whenever you have a franchise quarterback, you lock him up and you keep him for a long, long time. And so Justin Herbert is going to get the bag. There is absolutely no question about it. But I think what was really interesting, Dan, is the way that they structured this contract for Jalen Hurts and what that did for them and how that allowed them to still have some flexibility with the cap hits.
Absolutely. We know what he's going to get paid, at least early on in his contract, because Adam Schefter put out some of the numbers. And honestly, they're kind of hard to believe. It's been reported that he's basically getting, I think, $64 million by the time his first year of this extension is done. But these are what the cap hits are, right? 2023, $6.15 million. I think that's about $2 million more than what it was on his rookie contract as a second-round pick. But 2024, $13.56 million. 2025, $21.7. 2026, $31.7. Those don't sound like quarterback numbers. I mean, that sounds like some
Where's
wide
the rest
receiver.
of the money at, right?
That's like some wide receiver cap hits that we're seeing around the league. Like, I'm pretty sure Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are making that in 2024.
More, actually, more than that. Yeah.
No, I'm saying like each of them is making like each of them
Yeah.
is going to have a bigger cap hit in 2024 than Jalen Hurts is in 2026.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some magic there, and I think it gives you hope that, okay, not only, can they get this kind of extension signed, even though it's going to be huge money, that there's a way to at least give yourself some flexibility so you can keep that window open as long as possible and still try to put the best team around your superstar quarterback as you can.
Right, and I mean, I think this is the wizardry of having these guys like a Ed McGuire in the front office, a guy that
or a Howie
knows,
Roseman in this case, right?
Exactly. Just guys that know how to structure those contracts to be able to continue to add, because that contract's going to be there. You just going to have to be able to work around it. You're going to have to find more contributions from the draft. You're going to have to be able to get more payoffs from those quick, 1-2 year type of contracts. You need to get those. You need those to pay off. But being able to structure the contract this way allows a lot of flexibility and cap manipulation to be able to continue to be productive and be competitive year after year.
And it was the second most guaranteed money because the first most guaranteed money at signing was Deshaun Watson, who got his entire deal guaranteed. So that's also interesting, too, because that's really the last gigantic kind of max level player, top of the AAV scale player that we've seen signed since then. So more guaranteed money than we're used to seeing, right? 110 million guaranteed at signing, 173 total in guaranteed for him, right? Practical guarantees, what they call it. But with that, though, it's nice to know, okay, well, it's not going to all be guaranteed contracts. Maybe that happens someday, but it doesn't seem like that's going to be likely.
The NFL owners are going to do everything they possibly can to not allow that to ever happen again.
It may be that so, but I mean, all it really took in this case was a bidding war for one really, really good quarterback with a ton of red flags on off-field issues, and that dude got guaranteed money. So
somehow,
you never know.
Way.
You never say never. But one interesting thing I did take away from Brandon Staley's media press conference, which was, basically standard Brandon media press conference, right? A lot of stuff. But I think the most important was Justin Herbert's status for OTAs. When he was asked if he was going to be a part of OTAs, basically Brandon Staley said, yeah, up in the air. We're going to listen to the doctors. I know he's making progress, and we'll have those updates as we get closer to practice time. So not an ideal season for that to happen, David. You have a new offense rolling into town with Kellen Moore and a lot of verbiage and stuff like that. I don't think it's going to affect him much because I think as far as the off-the-field stuff, like repetition is always key. And the fact if he's missing repetition, if there's new wide receivers that are in that room that he needs to make a connection with, maybe that stunts that a little bit. But I'm not super concerned about it right now, but it does also just make me angry that he had that shoulder injury and he's still playing, week 18 in a meaningless game against the Denver Broncos.
One of a couple of meaningless injuries that occurred.
Jalen Guyton, that occurred late in the fourth quarter as well, of a blowout against the Jaguars, too.
And the Mike Williams injury, of course, that happened in that same contest. But yeah, obviously, let's not spend too much time talking about that because I don't want to give Dan an aneurysm here.
I know. My migraine is back.
I can understand why. But yeah, obviously not ideal when you have your superstar quarterback that is recovering from any kind of injury here. But it is his non-throwing shoulder. Also seen him, jumping off of boats, doing fishing competitions. So, I mean, hopefully he's not feeling too bad. But yeah, whenever you have to learn a new offense, and you can't go out there and rep it and really build that muscle memory over and over and over again, it's probably going to set you back a little bit. But also, let's not forget, Justin Herbert is not the average human. He's one of the smartest humans in the NFL. I mean, in college, he won the academic Heisman. It's just he's an incredibly bright human being. So that's obviously going to help him quite a bit. But again, never nice to see your quarterback not at 100%.
You never want to see it. I mean, the nice thing I think you did learn in 2022 is how tough your quarterback is.
Oh,
I
definitely.
think that means something, right?
Yes.
And the rib injury much more than the non-throwing shoulder labor injury. And you just wonder how he'll bounce back from his most injured season yet, really. The only season we've seen him injured, we've seen him decleat linebackers on the sideline and
knock
come out
linebackers
scot-free,
out.
So, like... It'll be interesting to see not just how he kind of responds to that, but also just how the team responds to it as far as are they going to try to limit the danger, even though it's something that happened in the pocket, like we were talking about before the show. Like, now they've seen, how much their team can be affected even by limited Justin Herbert. Does that make them more inclined to not put him in more danger by using, parts of his game that I think could really make him special as far as using his legs more and finding a way to... Yeah, of course, but that's just one of those interesting things that we're going to have to see how it plays out, right? And having Kellen Moore, I mean, he wasn't around for that last year, so maybe, he doesn't have to think about it too much. But I think you feel good about it, just where he's at right now. I'm not worried at all about what he's missing. That could change. We don't really ever get timelines.
He's there. He's there at voluntary workouts, which that's a good thing. So
where's the athletic trainer that's supposed to be helping this dude?
That would be nice to know. Yeah, they got to get that figured out here very, very quickly.
As far as I know, that man has not been hired yet. So that is another probably big thing I would say to now that we're back into off-season activities. Let's see if we can get that figured out. Pay someone, find the best guy in the world and offer him double. Like, this team has been so injury bitten. If you're doing anything less than like trying to steal other teams, if that's even legal, right? Give him, an assistant head coach / head athletic trainer. Man.
Always.
And it's just like, go find the best one. Try to steal the best one if you have to. That should be something where that person, after, kind of maybe potentially settling for the same guy for a long time, do not cut those corners on this
All your
hiring.
controllables Daniel, that you can actually impact without the constraints of the salary cap should be maxed out completely.
Right,
There
and
should
that's
be
just
no
never
excuses
that's
in that
never
situation.
been the case, though.
No, I know. I
I totally agree. But that's where teams get the benefit of having those rich owners, right? That's where it comes in, is stuff like that. But
that's what separates you.
Not worried about Justin Herbert. Still very, very excited about what's loading with that dude. And, I think he'll be just fine. But we did get to hear from Eric Kendricks for the first time as a Charger, really, right? And talked about his relationship with Kenneth Murray. That's already starting to form a little bit. And he also talked about how Brandon Staley recruited him on the telephone, which is something we've heard from many of the Chargers free agent additions. So we're going to talk about that right after this. Eric Kendricks is a signing that I think in a vacuum we would have all been very excited about, but it came with kind of the bittersweet nature of knowing that you were losing Drew Tranquill as well. But when you heard the Chargers talking about this dude, there was just an air of confidence around him and just kind of a feeling of we got our guy, right? So I want to talk about what he had to say to the media, but for the everydayers, you already know, but make sure you guys are back here for the rest of the week because we are taking a day off of draft film today. But that's just because tomorrow we're getting into our favorite receivers in every day of the draft so far, with our first round picks and who we like there, second and third round and day 3 picks. So make sure you guys are back here for that and for the Edge Rusher show on Friday before we get into our final mock, our ideal mock, the guys we really want starting next Monday. But Eric Kendricks, David, said something that we've heard from a lot of Chargers free agents, which is I came here because I really, had a great conversation with Brandon Staley, and after talking with him for an hour and a half, I was recruited.
Yeah, he said it was 11 o'clock at night, and I got to know his personality a lot. I'm glad that I can kind of fit into his program, into the system, but also I don't have to do too much as I come in. I can get to know the guys and also get to know the leaders on the team like Khalil and just kind of fit there and fit my role. So, I think that's a good way to do it. Just try to, get in there, put your head down, go to work, show everybody who you are as a worker, and then try to earn their respect and then start becoming that vocal leader. But that is one thing that is universal across the board with anybody talking about Eric Kendricks is they speak about him with an air of reverence. They really respect who he is as a football player and as a leader, and that was a major reason why Brandon Staley brought him into the fold.
And it just... Obviously, he's the only signing that they have this year, right? So it's hard to just say, hey, Brandon Staley is just, recruiting the best players in the NFL and having them come in on minimal, salary cap contracts. But, you don't usually hear about guys as much as you do when guys are getting signed by Brandon Staley because, well, what's your wife's name? How are your kids? And, oh, isn't this coach good? Blah, blah, blah. Brandon Staley building those relationships have definitely helped him, bring in this dude, as he's telling you right now, right? But also, you heard the same thing from Kyle Van Noy, talking to Brandon Staley and guys he's had in the past like Morgan Fox and Bryce Callahan wanting to play for him again because they've had their best seasons under him. He definitely carries that cachet. So as many as criticisms you have against, maybe don't play your players, your best all-star players in dumb games. This is, I think, a feather in his cap as he has been able to recruit guys like this because, it's not like they gave him a ridiculous amount of money with what some of those middle linebackers ended up getting paid, right around the market value of the, middling guys as far as, the Alex Singletons of the world getting around $6 million. So it's not like they paid, head and shoulders for this guy over what other teams would have paid for them. Seemingly, it does seem like the Chargers have had a pretty good gauge on what the market is going to be for these guys, whether it's Trey Pipkins or Morgan Fox and having the risk of that dude getting away.
Crazy value that they got out of that contract.
Totally. But the other interesting thing for Eric Kendricks, it's only his second NFL team, right? He's saying it's his 9th season, but 8 of those seasons were with the Vikings, and a lot of that was under one coach with Mike Zimmer, for most of his career. And it was interesting to hear him talk about, hey, this is kind of a fresh start for me, and I've always really worked better when I'm in that kind of underdog role where it seems like people are counting me out.
Yeah, he said I was kind of like the new kid in school. He said I was a little bit nerve-wracking for me, which is kind of interesting to hear from a veteran, a guy that's been in the NFL almost a decade. But, hey, you've been in one spot your entire career. You've been listening to the same coaches. You've been in the same city the entire time. And so, yeah, I'm sure it is a bit of a shock. But I think what kind of changes things a little bit for Kendricks is that he's going back to a place where he has a lot of familiarity. He went to school in LA at UCLA, and so he's basically coming back home in a sense. So I think fit-wise, I think it's going to work out just fine. And I like this guy. I feel like, I appreciate his pedigree, what he brings to the table. I feel like he is a complete linebacker, and he is going to be that commander in the middle for this defense.
That's what the hope is, right? Probably going to be the green dot for Brandon Staley's defense, but he thinks this is going to be reinvigorating for him, right?
Yeah.
Like he thinks that he needed a change of scenery after last year. I mean, he said it makes me feel like I'm the underdog again. I'm back at the bottom of the totem pole, which he's totally not. I have to prove myself to everybody, which he really doesn't. My new teammates and things like that. I'm not going to do too much. I'm not going to put too much pressure on myself, but it's natural personality for me to feel that way. So it's going to be interesting seeing this dude who always seems like he kind of is playing with a chip on his shoulder to kind of feel like that underdog role again. But it kind of has to manage that a little bit because he also talked about, developing a relationship with Kenneth Murray because we're hoping having him next to Kenneth Murray gets the best we've seen from him so far, can maybe level him out a little bit, maybe can make him a little bit more calm and help him have better reads and things like that he struggled with in the past, maybe getting off blocks, things like that. He said both of them have actually done driving. They both are in love with cars. They both did a drift circuit together where they both went car drifting and have a relationship there. And he said the fact that we can hang out in a different setting and kind of unwind and be personable with each other on that level is going to be great for us, which I agree. I mean, when players have relationships and stuff off the field, that I think does help the cohesiveness, especially for two new guys playing together for the first time. But I also thought it was interesting what Brandon Staley said about Eric Kendricks and his leadership specifically, because he put him in some rarefied air. He said, you get some of these special players that have all of it. Khalil Mack, Derwin James, these guys are fantastic premium players that also have the fantastic premium leadership stuff. We felt like he would bring a lot of that to our culture. Notice how he didn't put Joey Bosa in that list. That being said, notwithstanding, I think that kind of gives you an idea of what they're expecting. So he might not be putting a lot of expectations on himself, but it's clear what Brandon Staley's expectations are.
Yeah, very, very high. I mean, like I said, it's almost an air of reverence in the way they speak about Eric Kendricks. I mean, they definitely feel like he's going to be a major cog. I mean, putting him in the same graces as your Derwin James, which is, obviously that's Brandon Staley's guy. I mean, there's no, that's a face of the franchise, right? He's the guy that's at every event, the groundbreakings. He's the face that you have at all of those places, and you're putting Eric Kendricks in that same light. So he expects some very, very big things. And I mean, they're paying him decent money to go out there, but I feel like the impact he's going to have on Kenneth Murray is going to be something that's almost the most important thing that he can bring to the table, because I think up to this point, drafting and trading up for Kenneth Murray, it hasn't worked out. And so he's in a contract year here. And so he's going to have to go out there and put his best football on the field. And I think pairing him with a veteran that has so much experience is going to really help him out and hopefully get the best out of Kenneth Murray this year.
Yeah, and I think Kenneth Murray can still bring some things to the table as a blitzer. I don't think that's Eric Kendricks' strongest part of his game. So I think maybe he takes more of that role that Drew Tranquill had. But Eric Kendricks is going to help certain things. He should be better in run defense than what we saw from Drew Tranquill last year. That should help for sure. But Brandon Staley is making it clear that he's not just bringing him in for what he does on the field. It's off the field as well, right?
Yeah.
And it's getting these guys arranged defensively, being in the middle of everything, because he's put such an importance on guys who are in the center of the defense that can affect the most things, that are always in the quarterback side and things like that. And when you're talking about a team who pretty much led the league in broken plays defensively last year, that's an invaluable commodity. But to have, someone in there to help manage some of the personalities as well, hopefully, because this is a brand new group of guys. It's not that easy just throw a dude in there. The dude has to come earn it, just like Melvin Ingram said about Derwin James when he first arrived, right? You don't just get to show up with that credibility you had, for Derwin James at Florida State, right? This guy's done it in the NFL. I'm sure he's going to be respected for his play and how long he's been in the league. But this is a totally different setting. He has to go in there and earn it, and it seems like Brandon Staley is kind of demanding that of him, which I think is a good thing, because I think there's a lot of guys and a lot of young players that could really, take well to that and maybe need it more than they, and it just comes different when it's from players, right? Like,
oh yeah,
coaches can coach you and you can take it a certain way. It's different when it's coming from one of your peers, and sometimes there's things coaches can't tell somebody. Sometimes it has to be from a player. Sometimes it has to be a player-to-player conversation and a player holding another player accountable. That's something it seems like they're expecting Eric Kendricks to do.
Yeah.
The more of that you have on your roster, the better. I know there's, questions about his play, if he can be better than Drew Tranquill. I think these are things that, that are going to be hard to quantify where he can really help that aren't going to show up in the stat sheet as well. But thank you guys so much, as always, for checking out the show today. For the everydayers, we are the only daily Chargers podcast out there. To make sure you don't miss it, go follow us on YouTube or subscribe for free or listen wherever you get your podcast from. Tomorrow, the wide receiver show. We know the Chargers will draft a wide receiver in the 2023 NFL draft. They better, right? Better see something in the NFL draft. But we're going to talk about our favorite guys tomorrow. We're going to talk about where they could get some of these guys, who we like the most in round 1, who we like the most in rounds 2 and 3, and some later guys that they could potentially double dip on or bring in later in the draft that maybe can be a sleeper and find and carve out a role on this team before getting to edge rushers on Friday, because we know just having Chris Rumph as the only backup to Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack is not an ideal situation. So make sure you guys are here for that, and you can also find the show every day, and make sure you don't miss it by following us on all of our social media. You can find us on Twitter at LockedOnLAC. You can find me on Twitter at DanTalkSports and David Drogemeyer on Twitter at DroTalkSD. You can also find us on Instagram at LockedOnChargers, and you can find us on our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. We will be back with you guys tomorrow. Make sure you guys don't miss it. We will be talking about wide receivers, but until then, take it easy and go Bolts.